Hello, this is ABC and welcome to Data Engineering and Infrastructure Community.
Did last time was we learned about what is Spark, what are things, uh, so what are different connections the Spark has, how Spark basically works in the high level, at high level, and what are different uh, tools or technologies it can connect to. Okay, and now we are today we are going to start with uh, the actual coding exercise. Okay. So if you remember correctly from the architecture Spark, so the main entry point to my job is the Spark session. Okay, so whatever happens will happen only after the Spark session is created. Okay, and then after the Spark session, whatever job we write, that job is executed on the executor, or in some of the scenarios, some of the transformations may be applied in the driver as well. Okay, so this is just an background to it. Okay, so uh, so what I've done is I've created one SBT notebook. Sorry, not an SBT project. Okay, for a program to be called as a driver, we need a Spark session or a Spark session basically. A Spark session is the entry point. Correct? So what I'll do, I'll just create a Spark session. Since I'm running on local, I'll just set master as local star. You can just set local to or local this thing. Basically, what I'm saying is I'm running on local, okay, and this number is basically I'm providing the number of cores this program should use. Okay, so you can use local one. That means you are using a one core. Local two means two cores, and I'm doing local star. That means whatever the available cores are there, use all of them. Okay, then I'm doing get of field. So this is how a Spark session is created. So I'll just call it as Spark. Okay. So normally, so this is my Spark session, and let's suppose I want to do anything. Let's suppose I want to create a data frame or I want to do anything. Spark dot. This is the entry point to my program. Okay. So Spark dot create data frame. I can create create a data frame, or I can create an empty data frame. Create, uh, Spark dot create data frame. Then I have different options to create a data frame. I can just use an RDD, existing RDD. I can use a Java list and give a bin class to use it, or there are multiple ways to do it. But we are not going to use this way. So you can, for all the tutorials that you will find on the internet, it is basically using this method only. What they'll do is they'll use the Spark session and use a create data frame and use sequence of array to get to create your data frame. Okay, but that is not good. So there is a good way to start, but I would not suggest doing it. Okay, so I would suggest going with the SRE method. Okay? But before going there, normally what happens is uh, whatever configurations you want to set to your Spark. Okay, so let's suppose you want to connect to something. Let's suppose you want to connect to a database. Then you can give that configuration while creating the Spark job. Okay, so what you can Spark session only. So what you can do is you can do dot config. Okay, and here you can basically pass your configurations. Okay, so let's suppose I want to connect to a Kafka. Okay, so I'll give me a list. And I want to connect to Kafka. So uh, I can set all the configurations from there. So this way I can just set one configuration. Okay, but let's suppose I want to set multiple configurations, and since this is going to be used again and again, what I can do is I can basically create a method and use it, basically call that method again and again, to create my Spark session. Okay, so what I've done is I've created another class which is called as Spark configuration. Basically, what I've done is I basically right now I've done basically nothing. So I've just given it a app name, and I've given a master. I've just set a master. Okay, if I wanted to do other stuff, what I can do is dot uh, sorry, I exactly do not recall how to do this, but I can add other stuff. Okay, here only. Uh, so once I'm here back, so what I'll do, I'll just use that method. Okay, to create my Spark session, Spark configuration. So what as soon as I did it, it imported that here. Okay, dot return conf. Okay, so if you see it here, the return conf are basically done in two different ways. So it is a production mode true or false. So basically I use production mode for like I keep the production mode false, and I'll add whatever the configuration I want for my local here, and whatever the configuration I want for to run on a cluster on a cluster, I'll add those configurations here. So whatever configuration I want to set, I'll just set here. Okay, and whatever configuration I want to have on my local, I'll set those configurations here. Okay, and since this return function takes an input of the production mode, what I'll do, I'll just use this method here. Okay, so I'll just pass false because I want to run on my local. Okay, and you have setting the master is the most important thing. Without it, your Spark doesn't get started because it doesn't know where to run its resources. Okay, so this is the most important part. And in the production mode, I am not setting it because that thing will be set from the outside from the Spark submit. Okay, so what is Spark submit will get back to that later. Okay, but for now, just think of it passing it as a command line arguments when you're running any job. Okay, or any script that you want to run, and you're running this using the command line argument. Okay, so now this is my Spark session is created. Okay, my Spark session is created. Okay, so now what I want to do is I would just want to read a file. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just use Spark session. Okay, now there is a method called as read. Sorry. This is just my conf. Sorry. Okay. This is my just conf is there. This is I've created. This is my conf. My Spark session is still not created. Okay. I should not give it as name as Spark conf. I'm basically getting a configuration from there. Sorry. I'm a little nervous today. This is my first live session. I would say you can say that. Not first. It's basically second. So the similarity that we created earlier. So it's like Spark session dot builder dot config. Now I'm passing whatever config that I had. I'm just passing those config, and this was the config that I've created. Dot get or create. Okay, so basically get or create is if the session is available in the same job, and I wanted to create another session. So basically there can be only one session per. There should be just one session per job. That's why we have this thing get or create. Basically if I wanted to do some other changes, I just wanted to change the config of the session, I can do that from there. Okay, basically where is Spark this. This is my Spark session now. My Spark session now, my Spark session dot. I click on dot, you can see there are different things. Okay, so there is an object called as read. There is object called as there is a method called as SQL. So basically SQL, I can, if I want to do a SQL stuff, if I directly want to create a data frame, if I want to get the details of the Spark context, I can get that. I can create an empty data frame. I can access the catalog, Spark catalog. I can get this session state. I can get the configurations which I have set. I can get the SQL context, and there are some different methods as well. So basically, what we'll do is basically, since we want to read a CSV file, we are going to use the read object. Okay, spark.read. Okay, dot. Now what is happening is what I want to read. I want to read a CSV file. Correct. I'll read a CSV file. Dot CSV. I need to give the path. What I've done is I have kept the CSV files in a data folder here. Okay, and I want to read one of those files. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll just read the general data. So basically, what is the path to it? I can give the absolute path or I can give a relative path. Okay, so this is the home for this project. Okay, where I have the build.sbt. So relative path to it would be. So let me just minimize everything. Okay, so the relative path would be data, and inside the data I want to read this general CSV. Okay, now I have read this thing. Okay, uh, now uh, but this will give you nothing. Okay, let's suppose I have done this thing where df I have got a data frame. Okay, df is equal to data frame. Okay, so first of all, what is a data frame? Okay, so data frame is basically sort of like a list of rows. Okay, and each row has multiple columns. So it's basically like, let's suppose you have a database, and this data frame is basically a representation of the table. So a table has rows and columns. Basically, it has multiple records and it has multiple columns. Okay, and those columns can have any type, and this table can go from any length, from zero records to infinite number of records. It can go up to anything. Okay, but right now this is just a reference to data frame. If I run this job, it will do nothing. Almost it will do nothing. It will just do one thing. It will just get the details of this file and do nothing. Started, my Spark session is started. Okay, and nothing happened. It finished. Okay, but let's suppose I want to print the details of this file onto a local machine. So what I'll do is df.show. So now, if you can see, it is asking me the multiple parameters. So how many number of rows I want, or do I want it to be truncated? If I want to be truncated, then how much should it be truncated? I'll not do anything. I'll just do a df.show. Okay. So now it has read the data. Has read. If you can see, so there is, so this the file has been read. The header is there, but it is taken as another row in the call in the data. Basically, it has taken a row. Header has taken a row, and my column names are just like a placeholder. Underscore C0, underscore C1. Basically, these are placeholders. Okay. So basically, what I want to have, I know that my file contains a header. So first of all, let's just look at this file. Okay. So this is how my file looks like. So I have age, attribution, business department. What is it? We'll get to there after some time. Just bear with me for some time. Okay. What is there inside the data? We'll get there. So basically, what I have is, so I want my header to be there. So I know that my file contains a header, and I want to use that header. So what I'll do is option, and I want my header. Sorry. Now I'll run again. So now if you can see here, so now I have my headers with me. Okay, so which column represent what, I have the details. Okay, but if I see the schema of this thing, okay, if I see the schema, so uh, just a second, okay, you can see this thing. Okay, so this is my schema, so everything is considered as a string. Okay, but when I look at my data, so age should be an integer. This is also an integer, this also looks like integer. So why is it everything is taken as string? Because by default, when you are reading a CSV file, what it does is basically considers every column as CSV. In fact, if you read any of the file format, let's suppose you read JSON, or let's suppose you read a Parquet file, anything. Okay, so what it do by default, it will consider everything as a string. Okay? But you said so this is a disadvantage, right? So what we can do is we can basically use another thing, another option. If we have that option, I'll pass that as info schema as true. Okay, what I've done, I've just done info schema true. Now what I'll do, I'll just run this thing once again. Okay, so now if you can see, this thing has taken proper values. Okay, correct. So age is integer. Okay, so it looks fine. Okay, but maybe in some scenarios, what can happen is something is regarded as a string, but it might not be a string column, but because of the junk value, it has taken the string in inferring the schema. So normally what we do is we define a schema. Okay? So how do you define a schema? So there are multiple ways to define a schema. So I'll show you 2-3 ways. Okay. So the first thing is so there is something called as a struct type. So whatever schema you want to define, so it has to be a struct type. Okay. So basically, what you can do say is basically for any row, it should be part of one struct, and it can contain within the struct it can contain multiple rows, not multiple rows, multiple columns, and they can have different types. Okay. So what I can do is I have a struct type. Okay, and struct type basically it can contain, so it can contain an array of so different columns. So each column is represented by a struct field. Okay. Now, if I define a struct field, what it takes is basically you can see what is it is taking. Okay. It needs a name. Okay, so I'll just give a name page. Now, the second thing it is needing is what is the data type. So it is a integer. If you can see, it is giving me an error because whatever the types, normal Scala types are not used. Even in Python type, normal Python type cannot be used. You need to use the type from the Spark SQL. Okay, then and only then you can use it. So basically, in Spark, the equivalent of integer is integer type. Okay, so if you can see when I write this thing, so these are the different types which are being imported by default. Okay. Now the third thing is, after going this, so can it is it nullable? That means can it contain a null or not? Okay, since it is a CSV file and I do not know how it is, so it can be an it can contain a null and it may not contain a null. So it is an optional field. If you see, if I don't define it, then also it is not problem. By default, it is taken as null. Okay, and then I can define the metadata for each and every column as well. Okay, so this is my one field. So similarly, what I can do is I can define my other fields. I'll do is again take a struct field, use iteration, and it is supposed to be a type string. String type. So, and I'll just assign it to one variable. So now instead of giving it as an infer schema, what I can do is basically I'll just comment this out. I'll say dot schema. Okay. I'll just give it the name as the just to avoid the confusion of having the schema. Option. Now I can use this thing, but uh, you say okay, hey, then you just define just two columns. Okay. So defining a schema has it's a very powerful thing. Okay, so let's suppose you do not want to read the complete columns, you just want to read a subset of the columns. Okay, so what you can do is you can basically just define those two subset of column, and you will read the just those subset that subset of data instead of reading the complete data. Okay, so if you see now my data, I show you this data, it contains just age and attribution, nothing else. Okay, but it gave me a warning. Okay, the number of columns in the CSV header is not equal to the number of fields in the schema. Header length is 24 and I have the header size of 2. Okay, but what happens is let's suppose I've just defined these two, right? So what it does is basically it takes the first two columns and assign the schema. Okay, so if you have the uh, if you know the correct sequence to the data, then this thing works like a charm. Okay? But let's suppose you mess up with with the sequence. Okay, what I'll do, I'll just for a minute, I'll just comment this out, and I'll again infer the schema, and I'll again show you the data, and I'll explain what will happen. Okay, so instead of this thing, what I've done is I've just taken the business travel, I'll run it. Just a second, I have not defined the schema there. I'm just inferring the schema. That thing didn't work. See what happened. So I have the yes, no, and yes in my business travel column. And if you can see, my business travel column contains travel rarely, travel frequently, non-travel. Okay. So while defining the schema, you have to be aware of the sequence. Okay. So just to save the time, what I've done is just before this, I've just written the schema in one CSV file, and I'm going to use it. Ah, sorry, just a second. How did I get the schema? I'll show you that as well. Give it once. So just the thing. Okay, so this is how I define the schema. So this is one way of defining the schema. I'll just run it and show you this once again. Right? If you can see, this is the item and this is the actual schema. Alright, but let's say I just don't want it. I want to have my schema dynamic. I know my schema can change anytime, and I just want to have somewhere that if I can change anywhere, I do not need to change my code again and again. So there are different ways of doing it. Okay? So what you can do is, so just in the morning, I think Chandrakant asked in the Telegram group how to read the data using the JSON file. So that is one thing. So what you can do is you can just create a schema, a JSON schema from the struct field and then use that. Okay. So the another way is using the DDL string. So what is a DDL string? So DDL string is, let's suppose I want to create a table. Okay. So I can say create table. Okay. Table name, first database name and table name. Table name, and then I pass whatever I want to do. Okay. So I'll have the age. I want age to be int. Then I want my string. Similarly, I'll define the complete DDL for this table, correct? So instead of so the same way that you create a table, what you can do is basically remove this stuff, okay, and this thing you can use as your string to create a table, or basically define a schema. So you can call this thing as a DDL string, okay. So just a second. Okay, so the same way that we had earlier, we had defined the struct. What we can do is we can define this thing, DDL string, and use the DDL string to define the schema. Okay, so what I've done is, I go into this thing, my resources, application conf. So in Scala, you can use the application con as your property files. In different language, you have the different property files. What I've done is I've just basically created my this thing, okay, and let's suppose I wanted to add another column to it, okay. Okay. Now I've changed my schema, whatever the earlier schema was, and I'm going to use the schema. Okay, I'll come here again. I'll use this thing only. Then okay. Now to read the data from the application conf, what I'll do is upload dot thing I'll have. So if you can see in the application conf, it is inside dev. So I have a dev. Ah, okay, I have a dev, and inside dev I have this thing. Okay, so I'll do dev dot schema. Okay. Now this is the schema which is defined there, and I'm going to use the schema. Yeah, I can. Oh, sorry, I forgot to comment. Sorry. Yeah. So now it's giving me issue. Sorry. So right now what I've done is I've written a uh, multi-line string. Okay, and now to have a multi-line, I have used the pipe to continue it. So what I'll do, I'll just do a strip margin. Sorry, I forgot to remove the info schema first. Okay, so now you can see this is my schema, and now this is there. And now what I can do is using this stuff, even if my file didn't have that, but at the end what it'll do, it will just add a null to this column test. Okay, so I have a new column test, but it contains a null. So what can happen is, if you are reading the older files and it didn't contain the column test, then you will get a null. And let's suppose if I and the new column and the new file contain the column test, then it will be there. Okay, so it may happen that files may be coming from the different sources and they might have the different schema, but they are just a subset of schema. So this acts as a super schema for that. Okay.
If I
So
create
now,
so,
yeah,
okay, so if I create a new column but I set a data type as int, will it give me null or one or sorry, zero as
no,
a
it will be null one.
okay?
So it will be null one by default. It doesn't give me zero. Okay, so if you want, I can show you. Okay,
So it means it's an object type, the values are
yeah, it's an object. Yeah,
okay.
see, it is a null. Okay, it doesn't take a zero. So in Spark, anytime if you do not have a value, okay, it will not just go to the default type of the data. Okay, it will just assign a null. Okay. So similarly, what we can do is we can have a JSON file somewhere, and we can read a JSON file from a normal Spark, normal Scala stuff, and then just what we can do is basically for data type dot from JSON. So there is another option called .ddl, but my schema takes the DDL option directly, but whereas it doesn't take the JSON directly. Okay, JSON. So whatever the JSON I had read, I'll just parse it into a string and just add the string here, and dot as instance of, I'll just use the struct type. Now, uh, let's suppose you have your JSON data inside this one, then you can use this as a schema. So what I can do is go to the Telegram group. Okay, we had sorry, not this one. Yeah, this one. Today we add that in the group, right? Around, yeah, today morning something. Yeah, this one. Okay, what I can do is basically take this one complete thing. We value is basically del JSON schema. Add this one here. Here. Okay. And what I'll do is I'll give it the name as JSchema. By JSchema because I just use the JSON schema of spark dot empty data frame. Of type something like that. Processing. Sorry, I'm forgetting the schema. Sorry, the syntax for this thing. So basically, I can use the schema. For, uh, okay, there is a schema. So if you want, I can give you a schema. So basically, I can create an empty data frame with this type, and then use it at a later point. So
You showed many ways to load a schema into the
yeah,
database,
yeah,
and technically all of them are possible and feasible and workable.
yeah,
But
yeah.
where do you feel that what is there any particular pattern you realize that this is where you should use this is where you should use this? Because for me, if you say, I will say for convenience I will always use string. It is so simple. I will just post it
Yeah, it
into
is
a
so
file.
simple. Yeah. So yeah. So the thing is, let's suppose you use string, okay, and you want to parse some of the things, okay. Okay. So let's suppose you wanted to parse some columns into something else. I'll come to that point. Okay. So basically, you want to parse a column into a certain type. Okay. And then what will happen? That code becomes really unreadable. What you can do is you can basically since so normally what happens in general scenario is, so if you are not aware of your data and you are reading your data first time, then infer schema is the way to go. But when you are aware of, okay, so this is a schema of file that I am going to get, at that time defining a schema is a better option. So
Yeah, okay, so
this is the way we use.
okay. No, I think I could not explain the question well. I meant by creating your schema type. So, should I
Yeah.
create the schema as a conference file or as a struct file as a code, or you just saw
Okay.
showed
So
the
in what
string?
scenario we should use what
Yeah,
you're saying that,
yeah,
correct? Yeah. So uh, when you use a struct, so what happens? You cannot go above 2000 columns. Okay. And if you see this thing, when I have just 24 columns, so this is how my code looks like. Okay. So basically, my first 24 lines of code will look like this. So now assume that you have 400 columns. Okay. And now think how your code will look like. So what will happen is you will have different classes which have these things. Okay. So basically you will have basically one class, one singleton object which contains just a schema of just one file that you want to read. Okay. So instead of doing this thing, okay, so what you can do is you can basically create a JSON file of the schema and read that thing. Okay. So uh, that is where the JSON schema file thing comes into the picture, because that is a really good thing if you have the really high number of columns and you want to define a schema to it. Okay. And also what happens is it you can use that method when you are working with the different teams, and let's suppose from the source from where the data was coming in, the schema change. Okay. So what you can do is when you will say, okay, whenever you change the schema, at the same time you change this as well. Okay. So what they will do is, okay, so my file schema is changed, at the same time they have to change this as well. So now your program will accommodate that. But what can happen is, let's suppose they are deleting some columns which you are using, so at that time it can create a issue. Okay. So there are ways around it as well. So basically what we do is we basically keep that in a git. Okay, and whenever something happens, whenever the change happens, so at that time a trigger is happening and that file is being stored to some other place. So normally what happens, whenever some change is made at that time, from the git hooks you get a mail. Okay, so the schema for so and so thing is changed, and please look into it. If you think it's all right, then it can go. Basically, it's like before. So that happens in the staging environment or dev environment, whereas in the production environment, that thing cannot be committed without the permission of the what you call as the coordinator or the job owner. Okay, so when there has to be a merge request, and then only then that it can be done. So that is how normally it works, uh, at least in the scenarios that I have worked. Some people might be using other ways as well. Okay, and defining a struct schema is also one other thing to have test scenarios, or have you can call it exception handling. Okay, so what happens is, let's suppose there is some issue with the data, and you want to return, basically in your trackage block you want your code to run, and that even if that data is not there, but the other data is there that you are joining at some other stage, so that is required. Okay, so in that scenario, what you can do is you can basically return that as your empty data frame of the schema. So that is the other place you can use it. And also one more place is you can use it, basically use an empty data frame, and you have the different operations which has to be run, and basically run those different operations, and then just union it with the empty data frame again and again. Basically you define as a where, and basically append to it, basically union to it, since you know the resultant data frames there. It is not a good way with respect to Spark, but that is the only way to have different operations on this from the different databases, and have a common resultant data set from there. Uh, what I'm telling right now might go over the heads of most of the people, but that thing also I'll compare it. I'll have a demo for that as well in some
Okay,
time. Okay.
that makes sense. Thanks.
Okay. So now this is the thing. Okay.
Um,
So now as the next point which I was coming to, let's suppose everything was string. Okay, and I wanted to change the schema by myself. Okay, so in when you're working with a data frame, so there is a one really beautiful method called as the with column. Okay, it's a really great method. So what it can do is, basically when you use the with column, basically you can create a new column, or you can override the existing column. Okay, so when Abhishek was saying that, let's suppose I want to cast a column into a different column type. Okay, so let's suppose I have a column called as education, and I have not input the schema. All right, sorry, I have not input the schema. I have not given the schema. Okay, so in this scenario, what it is there? I do not have anything. Everything is string. Correct. I'll use education. Okay. So now to refer this column education, okay, it is expecting a column. It is expecting a column. It is first basically it is seeing with column, and it is give me what is the name of column you want to create. Okay, and you need to pass a reference column. Okay, so basically what you can do is, there are multiple ways to refer a column. So first thing is data frame name dot column. Okay, now I need to import users. I need to import something. I import. Why is it not working? Just a second. Oh, sorry. Let's see. Sorry. I'm referring it. within itself. Here dot call, basically it gives me the column name. This other way to refer it is, okay, I'll just pass column name, df column name, or what I can do is basically use call method, which basically takes the input of thing and passes the reference of that column from the same data frame. Okay. Uh, that is there. There is one more way to do it. Basically, education, and I have a the quote at the end. But sometimes, sorry, it's I think at first. Yeah, first. Okay. Yeah. But I would not suggest using this thing because sometimes the interpreter or your ID fails to detect it. Okay. But the most common way to use it is this stuff. It works almost everywhere wherever you have the reference to the column. So I would suggest using this one because this is a really good reference to it. Uh, People use it different ways. People use if dot call. So why do you need to call a reference to df when it is directly taking the reference to that? So you use this method when you are joining the columns, but when you are joining two data frames, you can use this reference. But uh, other than that, I would say do not use it. Okay. There is one more way you can use it. Basically, use SQL expression. Okay, SQL expression. What you can do is basically expr expression, and you can pass your SQL expression within this thing. So I'm just uh, using this thing. Okay, so basically, uh, okay, so this is just to give you a way how you can use the with column method. Okay. So now coming to the point of casting your data. Okay, so this is one thing. This SQL expression. So cast as data. Okay, this is one way. I'll for other columns as well. I'll do that. Age.
Can
I'll
you try
just give
different
you this.
ways like education
Yeah.
and using the functions? Okay.
So same way, broadcast. Now you can give a string, or you can basically give the type directly. Type column. Uh, this column. So these are the different ways to cast the data. Okay. There are many more, but uh, you can say this thing. Okay. So it is same thing I'm writing in the different ways. Okay. So it depends on the preference because everything is at the end getting converted into the Java. How is it being done? I'll tell you in some time. Okay. So this is how you do it. Okay. But let's suppose what I want to do is I want okay. So let's suppose I want to rename a column. Okay. So that can also be case. Correct. I want to rename a column. What I can do is dot with column rename. Okay. So what it does, it basically takes string as an input of the input column. Sorry, the
Satish, do you have a
column which I want
question?
to change the name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a quick question, Hitesh.
Yeah.
So the width column you're creating, right? So it will create a new column to the data frame, correct? So
Yeah. So if the
you are
same
using this.
existing name is available, it will just replace that column.
Okay.
Okay.
So it will not
That's
be
what your
duplicate.
question was, right? It will not be
Yeah.
duplicate. It will just
Okay.
replace that column at the same
Okay.
place.
Okay. Got
All
it.
right. age, and I want to rename it as, I just want to rename it. This way you can rename it. I'll just run the code. Nothing will happen because I have run the show over here. I think I've made some as cast as in, I think I'm missing the SQL expression. Let's see.
An infrastructure
Again, I cannot resolve. Oh, I preferred doing a demo here is this one, because in Intel in notebook I would not have that liberty of having the thing. So in some notebooks I do get it, but
Yeah, I mean, but
this
as a
point in
data
time,
engineer, access of our notebook is less and more in the code base, so
yeah,
it's fine. Yeah.
yeah. So this is okay. But let's suppose what I want to do is, if you can see, everything is in capital, right? Capital letters. I want to have the lowercase names for every column. So I basically what I want to do is I want to basically lowercase all the columns in this data frame. Okay. So what I can do is here, okay, there is an object called as columns. When I do a def.columns, it returns me a string of column names. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to rename each and every column. So since it is written me an array of string, a Scala string or a Python string, almost same thing can be done in Python as by Spark as well. So whatever I'm doing right now is same thing can be easily replicated to Python. Just remove the val. Just remove the val. Everything else almost works fine. Just you need to take care of the indentation and the quotes, single quote and double quote. Okay. Dot. Okay, so what I'll do, what I'm doing is basically I want to basically rename the column, correct? So how did I rename the column here? Okay, so this is one way. So the other way is using the alias. Okay, other way is using alias. So what I can do is I can create a complete string, a complete sequence string, which will basically take a name and as the other name. Okay, or the other way is I can just do there is a method called as. So when I'll do a with column, okay, I'll show you here. Okay. Dot as. Okay, so it's dot as or dot alias. Okay, basically whatever alias I want to give it, I can use it. Okay, as or alias, I can use that method. So what I'll do is I'm using a map basically for each column name. What I'm doing is its initial column name, okay, and I'm renaming it to x dot. Okay. So this, so if I show you this thing, reports. So if you see this thing, array calls is an array of column. Okay, I'll show you what is it inside. What happened to the thing which I've done for each. I'll remove this show for now. Okay. So if you can see here, so what I'm doing is age as this thing. Okay, so whatever operation you want to perform with your column name, let's suppose in some cases you want to convert from the camel case or the Pascal case into the snake case, whatever you want to perform, or however you want to rename your column. So this method is helpful in that. Okay, so So basically, I have what I've done, I have created an array of columns. So then what I can do is df dot, there is a method called as select. Okay, so basically I'm selecting water column. So basically what it can take is, it can take a single type column or a row, complete row, or it can take a string, basically string, not a list. Basically it takes a string uh, in the same line only. Okay, uh, it is there. Okay. So what I can do is basically array calls colon underscore star. What colon underscore star does is, it's basically pass it as a comma separated, uh, or you can say a flat string, a flat value of strings, or flat value of those values. Okay, so basically it is passing me, so this expression, then this expression, then this expression, then this expression in a single line. Okay, instead of array. uh, there is something similar to this in PySpark. I'm not aware of. What I'll do is I'll just replicate the complete stuff I have written there in PySpark also, and provide the GitHub link sometime next week. Okay. So now what I'll do, I'll just have a show on this, and I'll just comment this one. Okay. So if you can see there,
in PySpark, I think it will be df.select. Then inside the bracket, it will be dot star. That's it.
yeah. So whatever it is, I do not recall right now because I do not use PySpark as much as Scala Spark.
Okay.
That's
Yeah,
it.
no
Okay.
worries.
All right. So if you can see, all the column names are lowercase. Okay. So similarly, I can do whatever way I want to rename a column, whatever operation I want to do this way, I can do this thing. Sometimes what I can do is, I can basically using this method. Let's suppose I want to perform operations dynamically. I can do that as well. So what I can have is, basically in application con, I have, let's suppose, column name and what operation I want to perform. Okay, and I have a map which basically takes, okay, so this operation and this operation means I need to call a separate method. I'll not go there right as of now. I'll show you a glimpse of that just in 2-3 minutes. Okay, what I want to see. Okay.
Hitesh, just for information as a time,
Yeah.
you can wrap it up because in that
I'll just show one.
yeah,
Just
that's what
one.
I'm saying. Like you can,
Just one.
you whenever you feel comfortable, you can wrap it up. Like I don't want to hold you for longer.
Yeah, no, I can go for at least an hour or more, because that much content is really good. Alright. So this is the thing. Okay, so I have just renamed the column. So I'm not talked about the data yet. So what data that we have? So this is basically an HR analytics data. Okay, so if you can go to Kaggle, where is Kaggle? Uh, I think I think this was the data. Not this one. Yeah, this one. This was the HR analytics use case data. I'll share the link of this as well. So which I've been using. Okay. So if I go to this data dictionary, okay, if you can see, for each column, there is a meaning. Okay. So in, if you can see in the education column, there is just a number. Okay. Similarly, in the job level, there is just a number. Okay. There are, for a lot of stuff, there is a reference to a number, and basically what that number mean, that is given in this sheet. Okay. So if you can see education level, so 1 means it's a below college, 2 means it's a college, 3 means it's a bachelor, 4 means it's a master, 5 means it's a doctor. Similarly, there is a environment satisfaction. Then there is a job satisfaction level. There is a performance rating. So work life balance, what does it mean? Okay, what does that number mean? Okay, so this is a really common scenario. So what so how to solve it? Okay, so basically what people do is they do basically one of the two things. What they will do is they will make some small data frame with with two columns. This is my education level, and what does it mean? Okay, so same way they will create, that is one way. So data frame of two columns, basically this is one and this is two columns, and then they will join with this data frame. Okay, and get the data. Second one is using the when method. Okay, I'll show you that what I mean by the when method. Okay, uh, I'll just let go of this thing right as of now. Okay, I'm working on this thing only. Okay. This is also not required. I'm working on the main DF only. Okay. DF. Okay. So if you can see, I'll just take an example of education, nothing else. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll just take the column as education, and since I just want to work on that just for the time being, but we can use it at a later stage. This is another one. So select all. I can just pass the string as well. Okay. Dot education, but it is the original data frame, not which I have done the lowercase. Okay. Dot show. Okay. Now as you can see, I have just this column. Okay, so I just want to have the reference with that. So what I can do is basically I can create a column with column, and I want to have the education level at the same thing in the education only. So these are the level, and what is the actual education that is there here. That is what shown in this Excel, correct? What I can do is basically with column education. Now there is a method called as when. Okay, so when is like your if else case. Okay, but when there is a condition, I need to give a condition. So it's basically asking for a condition column, or I need to have a condition column should return a boolean. So if I have a column which just returns a boolean, or I have to write a expression which returns a boolean. Okay, column condition. Okay, so when my column is equal to one. Okay, what I want to do is I want to have value as. So what I can do is I can just pass as a let. Okay, so now it takes a literal value of 1. Okay, so even if it might be a string, but it will consider it. So it will do it even if I just pass a 1, right? When I have not input the schema, it will try to compare, and if the casting can be done internally, then it will cast it and then use it. It's not like it will break completely. Okay, I'll show you. Okay, so what happens. So it's below college, correct? I'll copy this thing, add this value, and whatever condition that I have, I'll just add dot when, and I'll have the all the conditions there, correct? So what I'll do is I'll just copy this thing, just cheating a little. Okay, all right, all right. Just last thing. Okay, just last thing. This is the last thing that we have today. All right. So similarly, I can add for everything. I'll just add two, and this is college. Okay, sure. Okay. So if you can see this thing, So what it did is it took the entries for 1 and 2, and for all other value it passed with the null. Okay. So to avoid this null, what I can do is I can have the otherwise. This is other way people do, and there is one more way to do it. Is basically creating a map and using that map to get the value out of it. So creating a map is a really good way to do it, but I think the time is not permitting me right now, so I can show you in the later demo.
Meanwhile, thank you very much for your time. I think you started from very basic, so it is very good for all who wants to start on Spark. So I will definitely share this session, and then in the next session we can take it from there, because uh, you are not going actually the high level. You are actually going on the very base, and that those are something which everybody said no, like it doesn't available everywhere. You just get, yeah, do this part, use this function, but you are actually starting from a position I didn't even anticipate. So that was good. That was great actually. Thanks for that. Okay, with that, thank you very much. Thank you for time.